Are you ready to see massive pyramids in China? Pyramids that were built by the previous civilization and are now just being called hills. Are you ready to uncover something massive today? Here we go. We have been taught that the pyramids in Egypt were very rare. These pyramids in Egypt were an anomaly. Well, we have found that there's a pyramid right outside of St. Louis that has a temple 2 feet under its base. We have found that there is so much underneath the ground, including catacombs and tunnel systems, that is yet to be exposed. And now today, we are finding that people have just been living in a town called Anlong, located in China, with possibly hundreds of pyramids sitting all around them for all this time. In an article published on May 15th, 2024 by English.news.cn titled Pyramid-Shaped Hills Become Popular Tourist Site in Southwest China. The article starts off saying that we are looking at several hills that resemble the pyramids of Egypt in a suburb county in China, when it goes on to say that the hills are made of parallel layers of stone, where we know that these are no longer hills. We don't need the experts' help. We've got this one covered. Parallel layered stone walls. When you can see that there is not just one, we're dealing with something massive, uncovering something that would completely change everything about what we have been told. I've told you all that we're just getting started, and that is because all of our eyes are now open. We are seeing it all now. Everything that was just hiding right in front of all of our faces, somehow, right in our towns, will now be brought to light. 99% of us were under some sort of trance. For some reason, we were all unable to see these types of things all over the world. Buildings that don't belong in our timeline at all. Walking or driving right past them every single day. But now that we have the knowledge, we can now see what is right in front of us. And the trick no longer works, which is why everyone in the world now needs to see this information so that they don't live in a town with hundreds of pyramids right next to their local coffee shop and think that old world pyramids are just hills, like we've all been told. At this point in time, I feel like we are being shown the truth. At no other point in our timeline has this information, the truth, been flying at us at this speed. When we are finished, no pyramid will be unexplored. Nobody is going to think that these are just hills. We all understand that if we were just told that these were pyramids and not hills, that it would show that the mainstream history that we've all been told is not the full picture. In fact, it would show that the narrative is possibly 100% fabricated or very close to it, showing that they've been saying that pyramids have been hills for so long, and now changing their mind would let doubt creep in, and people would start asking questions like we are today as to what else could be a pyramid. What other hill just has a temple laying underneath it? This is exactly what we're asking. This would all show that the mainstream did not include the previous civilization into their narrative. A civilization that built all of the pyramids, all of the buildings. They had incredible technology, and they were not here as far back as we all thought. A civilization that was capable of constructing not just one pyramid, but hundreds of pyramids all over the world. And that tools have been here, advanced technology and the rest. This lie would be completely exposed. Now, as you can see, something happened and is now triggering the release of this information. All of these articles, all of these companies are now writing about these hills that have supposedly been there the entire time. Why now? Have they always been there? Of course they have. We have all just gone from VCR straight to 4K, a shift in consciousness, or you can call it an upgrade, now allowing us to see things that are in this realm that we all live, which means that these now need to be explained now that we can see them, which is exactly what they're doing. Where in an article written by the Global Times, they don't even give us a person. They just tell us that the Chinese media outlet, Eyes News, they found their guy, a professor that would back their story up, saying that the mountains were, of course, natural happenings, which is why they have their pyramid-like shape. When he was asked, why do these natural happenings have parallel layered stone? He replied that they date back 200 million years to the early to the middle Triassic ages. Pinning this date down, 200 million years. Right. 200 million years ago, the early to the middle Triassic ages. This guy is just amazing. So the professor is just on it. He is the guy that should be fully trusted. Pinning this date down in his dreams. Where does he even come up with a number like this? 200 million years ago. Why didn't he just say 150 million years ago? Why not 800 million years ago while you're at it? I'm going to be very clear. This so-called professor has zero clue about what happened 200 million years ago. In fact, we don't even know if there was a 200 million years ago. It's very possible that never happened. These articles, these dates, are not fooling anyone anymore. Just throwing nonsense out there, pretending to know all about the year -200,000,001 or -200,000,002. It's ridiculous. All because we asked a professor who studied their books. This is no longer classified as factual information. If it looks like a pyramid, it has parallel stones laid over and over and over, exactly like we have seen in Egypt, then we will start at that conclusion and work from there. We are not going to research from the standpoint of guessing about 200 million years ago. From that point of view, you will find nothing. You will go to sleep, wake up, look at the pyramid, and think it's all because a T-Rex decided to take a crap there and think it's a hill, exactly like they like it. And to show that we are all just getting started, staying in China, and a documented U.S. Air Force pilot's account of what he saw in 1945, saying that he was flying between India and China when he saw a pyramid that would put Gizas to shame. Pure white on all sides. And then 2 years later, Colonel Maurice reports the exact same experience. And the New York Times runs his story. This tells me that China has some pyramids that we definitely haven't been told about, and we need to investigate further. So these accounts, we now know, took place in a province of northwestern China, where we know that they have nearly 40 known pyramids in this location, where they're covered with trees and grass. So what is this group hiding from us? Why cover up hundreds of pyramids and tell us they are just dirt from 200 million years ago? Why do this? Again, it would change everything. It would show us that there was an extremely advanced civilization that was here very close to our timeline, most likely wiped out by an event. And they were able to construct pyramids all over the world, over and over and over, which is why they have to call them hills, because this would blow 99% of people's minds today. Are these naturally forming? Do you need the professor's help? I don't think you do. I personally think that people used to like that comfort of thinking that the professors could figure it all out. Where that's all changed now. We no longer need somebody's help, someone that has read all of their indoctrinated books and has sat up nicely in their seat in the front row. We don't need this guy to tell us about 200 million years ago. We definitely don't need that type of thought process anymore. We understand that there is a much more likely possibility sitting on the table of how all of these structures all over the world were created and why they are here today. Places that you can go and see all for yourself. You can go inside most of them. Basilicas, cathedrals, temples, caves, or melted structures. And of course, pyramids. It's incredible, all over the world. And it's not because a little rain came down and splashed the dirt off the ground and created a perfect pyramid. It does not form pyramids that have perfect parallel stonework. We all understand this now. We are seeing right through the nonsense. And it no longer takes us all months to process this. Thousands of us. We get it now right when we see it. We are told that the Chinese pyramids of that region are built of mud and dirt and are more like mounds than the Pyramid of Egypt. This was reported by the Science newsletter in 1947. But of course, the region is little traveled. So let me know in the comments if you think these things are really made of mud and dirt, or if they are just covered by it and something massive is hiding underneath. When Western archaeologists have, to this day, rarely been permitted to investigate the sites, overgrown by shrubs and abandoned at first glance, going on to say that the shrubs are clearly deliberately planted, planting many cypress, one of the fastest growing trees out there, hiding this right in front of our faces for years. Until now. Now I'm going to go to Google Earth. I'm going to show you that you can't even drop the guy down and look at these places. Right outside of the city, we have multiple pyramids right here, covered by trees, unexplained by the mainstream narrative. These are pyramids of the previous civilization, in my opinion, that are still here today. We have another one over here, all around the same city. We're not traveling thousands of miles, just like we saw in Anlong to start this episode off. They're all over the place. Here's another one. And then we have this one over to the left and another one over here to the right. We have two more over here. So are you understanding how the narrative has been manipulated? How it's not just information that has been suppressed. It's also massive pyramids. And then we have these two, where if we change the angle here, you can see that there is a circle here that seems to have significance, leading straight to this pyramid, where it has the crosshairs right here, with a bunch of trees to try to cover it up. It's very strange. And you can even see the door opening that was once here, or possibly still is. And you can see how close it is to the other pyramids. I've got a question. Why does this massive pyramid not have a name or a story? Giving this pyramid a name or a story would change everything. It would be an admission that what we have been told is a massive lie. They would have to explain why they've been covering this thing up with trees and dirt. Could you imagine living here? These people live here next to two pyramids, and the pyramids have no name and no story. Just a bunch of trees and dirt covering them up. No, those aren't pyramids. Those are just dirt mounds, of course. And everybody agrees, all because a professor went to his room one night and said, it's from 200 million years ago. This is insane. So I want to go back to Anlong, China, where we have cave openings. We've seen that cave openings are, in my opinion, just front entrances to a bigger overall structure. We have this ridiculous name, where we have seen them name things like this and mock us all over the world. So we have this cave, and then we have this cave over here. Again, these are entrances to the pyramid that we have shown at the beginning of this episode. We are not allowed to drop this guy down on Google Earth, which should be very telling, not allowing us to see what's going on there. There are 0 articles about these places. We are simply being blocked off from our true past. So we remember that the professor said that these were naturally forming hills from 200 million years ago. Well, we know that they are stone, and we know that they have caves. How are they going to explain the caves to us? Oh, in the second half of 133 million years ago, the water level spiked for 40 years, and the current chiseled out the stone hill accidentally. And what do you know? Now there's a cave. It's weird how nature works back in the day. And to show that there are so many structures that need to be explored. Structures that are brushed off as hills from millions of years ago. Accidentally brushed into by a rhinoceros from millions of years ago. Not just in China, but all over the world. We can go to Utah, USA. More specifically, Wayne County, where we are told that there is a pyramid that was formed during the Jurassic period. So, if they find a pyramid, they chalk it up to the dinosaurs. Can you believe this? Or they just cover it up with trees and dirt and pretend like it's not even there at all. and don't say anything about it and act like we shouldn't see it either. But if they find a cave in India while on a tiger hunt, like we just saw in episode 73, then they can pin an exact date on it somehow and explain the whole thing away. We are told that this thing is composed of sandstone that formed 180 million years ago, give or take a few hours. They took samples home and tested it. Just trust them. They know all about the year negative 180 million. In fact, they know all about the year negative 181 million as well. It is pretty cool being a certified scholar. You just get to make up any date you'd like. 180 million years ago, on the dot. Amazing. These experts help us a lot, telling us that because it's in a hot, dry climate for the last 180 million years. So we have steady climates for 180 million years. Nice to know for those that are in Utah. You can enjoy that climate for years to come. So 180 million years of hot, dry climate. Wind blowing over sand dunes, creating large sweeping crossbeds, dating all the way back to the Jurassic ages. Wow. Incredible how they know all of this. I think the local spider was documenting all this and hid it underneath some of the sand. It's incredible. Long after the sedimentary rocks were deposited, the Colorado Plateau was uplifted relatively even. It's just amazing. Keeping the layers roughly horizontal. They have all of this on camera. It's documented in the Colorado Scrolls. No, it's not. But the Capitol Reef was an exception, of course, because of the water pocket fold, which formed between 50 and 70 million years ago. You know, somewhere between then, give or take. Not 40 million and not 80 million. A much more obvious answer to this is that it is a structure that 100% looks melted. It is not from 70 million years ago. It is from the previous civilization, with an elevation of 6,211 feet. This was a massive structure that proves how incredible this previous civilization really was. And right next to this structure, we have an arch. It's called the Cassidy Arch, that the mainstream will tell you that the local Bronchiosaurus used as a hangout spot, running away from the T-Rex, where they know that the Bronchiosaurus was a peaceful animal. They were there and know all about the year negative 150 million. No, they don't. Not even close. Now, we have some incredible pictures of this place. Is this not a tree that is now turned into stone? It's just incredible. You can see that an event took place and has completely melted this place. And you can see just how big things were before. We have some other angles of this melted palace. And then we have this shot. You can see that the front of this place was cut perfectly. This is not natural at all. Perfect 90-degree angles and arches into stone is not a natural occurrence, especially when right next to this melted structure, right next to Cassidy Arch, we have Hickman Natural Bridge, where they're telling us that nature just forms stone bridges now too. They're telling us nature forms pyramids, arches, and bridges, all here accidentally during the Jurassic period. This is what we have been told. Can you believe this? I really hope you all can see after this how crazy the narrative is. We have more perfectly formed arches that they just haven't got around to naming yet. Clearly an opening to another structure right here. And if this picture doesn't get you, then I'm not sure what will. In my opinion, this is clearly a structure from the old world that was built and has since been melted. This was not from sandstone blowing in the wind 150 million years ago. It's not even close to that. There are so many of these arches. This place must have been incredible. This is the complete opposite of naturally forming. We have these structures with even more arches over here. You can see how big they are too, compared to the people standing below. And up here, they look like they used to be windows. This is definitely a place I'd love to visit and see if there are any openings with a few more photos to show that this is not naturally forming, to show that this place has a much deeper history, a much more meaningful history than what we have all been told, where we are all here to learn and grow, and we are no longer being held back from doing that. We are finding more and more evidence every single week that our true past is so much more exciting and entertaining than what we have been told and what we have been shown in our classrooms. We are seeing structures that have arches, windows, doorways, bridges, pyramids that have been hiding under trees and still are, but they are now being discovered by thousands of people. Locations named Cathedral Valley. Are we being told what these structures used to be? Are these melted cathedrals?
I even found the name of the chef, but not a word about what they were served. Not a word about what they were served.
Today, we are going into the Chicago Public Library's archives, locating information that will expose the tunnel systems located right under the city of Chicago. We know here on this channel that we are definitely not being told the full story regarding the tunnel systems all over the world, where they start off by telling us that the very first major tunnel project was dug under Lake Michigan to a water intake 2 miles out in 1864 to 1866. This is 29 years before the invention of the power tool. Digging massive tunnel systems under the lake, where it goes on to say that Chicago kept on digging away, creating thousands of miles of underground structures, where in my opinion, this is the beginning of the narrative for these tunnels that were created by the previous civilization. Thousands of miles of underground structures right underneath the city of Chicago, all according to public records in the Chicago Public Library. So let's go deeper. I was able to locate someone that has recently been inside the tunnel systems, and they shared what they saw with me. And now I'm going to share it all with you. We have seen these photos. They are on the internet, and here it is today. We can see that the railway is still there on the floor, looking exactly like we see in these photos that we are told is from pre-1906. Over 120 years ago, I was sent other photos that I think you will all want to see. These tracks lead throughout the entire tunnel system, using them as transportation throughout the entire city. We have shown in episode 42 how these tunnel systems are in every single city in the world, how they connect all of the buildings together underground. These buildings are bigger than we can see. There is so much more under our feet than we realized before, where we can see that this tunnel system leads right to the Chicago City Hall, a building that we were told was constructed in 1911. Of course, holding the fire story, where this is a nod, meaning one of three things, or a combination of them. In my opinion, of course. 1, it's letting them all know which building is from the old world. 2, where the catacombs are located. And or 3, where the tunnel systems are located. I believe it is a nod to these three things at this point. And we need to remember this for the future and keep track of what we continue to see throughout our research. They also tell us that there was a previous city hall. Now, it's very interesting that they tell us that these tunnels were constructed by the Chicago Tunnel Company. Great name. And their history begins by letting us know that there were initial tunnels. Initial tunnels. Are these not the tunnels that were found? You tell me. Especially when they go on to say that the city of Chicago had no idea what to do with these tunnels, granting the newly formed Illinois Telephone and Telegraph Company the rights to construct utility tunnels under the streets of Chicago in 1899. So 1899, they start making tunnels for phone lines. I thought we were told by the Chicago Public Library in their archives that they were digging thousands of miles of tunnels decades before this. That's right. We were told this. And the first telephone in Chicago didn't come until 1877. So what was Chicago doing digging tunnels for thousands of miles before the telephone? Because we know this wasn't the true purpose of these tunnels, and they are trying to push it off that they needed the tunnels for telephone cables in 1899, where we can see very clearly that the dates are beginning to collide, the very beginning of a massive narrative slip-up. So let's keep going. They continue on by saying that the initial plans for the tunnels called for filling them with phone cables, when we just showed that that is not true at all. This was not the initial plans for the tunnels. Not even close. We have found something massive, in my opinion. A massive lie. And here's where they're going to try and explain why they have railways in all of these tunnels. When the city, of course, said no, you cannot use the manholes to get the cables into the tunnels. Of course they did. They say, yes, we need you to dig tunnels for our phones. But no, you can't use the manholes to actually get the cables down there. I'm going to ask you, how ridiculous does that sound? Refusing to permit manholes through which cables could be unreeled into the tunnels. The plans were then changed, of course. Changed to include rails for hauling cable spools through the tunnels. Incredible. Where the city was largely unaware of the nature of tunneling. They didn't even know how big these tunnels were or where they went, saying they were unaware. Unbelievable. The clearest proof that we have ever been told on the tunnels, in my opinion. A huge sentence right there for our research. Can you see that these tunnels were constructed by the previous civilization now? Are you able to see the truth that a previous civilization was here, much closer to our timeline than what we have been told? And all of their work has been left behind for us to see, for us to uncover, where the first 16 miles of tunnels had to be excavated to remove earth carefully and systematically from an area in order to find buried remains. Now, we remember that the public library told us that there are thousands of miles of underground structures. Is this limited to just tunnels? Or is this another proof that there are buildings, structures, exactly like they say, right under our feet, underground? Thousands of miles of underground structures. What are we seeing today? I think we have unlocked something massive. I think they are very aware of what is under the ground at this point, and they were rediscovering it in the 18 and 1900s. And we are now following behind them right now. It's all out there. If you're able to read with open eyes, it clearly states that there are thousands of miles of underground structures right under the city of Chicago with maximum use of scarce real estate. Is this not exactly what we want to see? Is it not putting everything together for us? Connecting it all, showing that buildings are underground, real estate underground. Thousands of miles of underground structures right under the city of Chicago. We now know that this is here. It is no longer a question of if the previous civilization's work is underground. It's now a matter of just finding them and exposing them to everybody in the world. We now know that they are there. We have photos of inside the tunnels. We know that they lead to all of the buildings. Thousands of miles of tunnels, underground structures, underground real estate. We know that there are thousands of miles of tunnels. We were told this. Yet here in 1910, the system is only showing us 60 miles on the map. So we know that there's a lot of tunnels that are not being shown to us today. And we know that these tunnels connect to these buildings, and I'm going to show that soon, including the City Hall. It's so interesting to me that they leave this part of the story out every single time we have never seen in any construction story that they connected the local tunnel to the building. We don't see that the city hall also has a tunnel system connected to it within the narrative. Yet we know that the city hall is 100% connected to this massive tunnel system. I have also located first-hand accounts of these tunnels where this individual worked at the Field Museum of Natural History in the late 1970s, where he explains that the building was a customer of the Chicago Tunnel Company, where the tunnel was connected via an elevator. And he explains that after all of the freight cars were abandoned, they were destroyed and scrapped, except for one, which remained in the Field Museum's sub-basement. A basement to the basement is what we are reading. This building is much bigger than we are told. Cut off from the rest of the tunnel system was a train from the past. The manager of the physical plant, Norman, took this individual down there, and he says it seemed at the time they would remain there forever. Well, no, they removed them in the late 1990s, of course. And then the Illinois Railway Museum took them over, supposedly saved and are now preserved there, where you can read about them here. Here, meaning 404 page not found. So I would be shocked, personally, if they're still there today, just knowing what we know. For anyone that wants to check it out, it is located at 7000 Olson Road, Union, Illinois, right outside of a town called Marengo. Very interesting stuff. I would love to know if those carts are still there, or if they would tell us that they ever had them, and if they would have a further story about them. So this story continues on to say that on April 13th, 1992, what some have called the Chicago flood began, where contractors accidentally disturbed the clay surrounding one of the freight tunnels. Of course they did. Do you think this was an accident? You gotta let me know in the comments. Where the leak wasn't taken seriously at first, where it turned into a breach near the Chicago River, with eventually hundreds of millions of gallons of water flowing into the tunnel system and into the sub-basements of many Chicago buildings. Again, I'm gonna ask, knowing what we know, do you think this was an accident? Or do you think this was a destruction project where a man named Bruce had his 15 minutes of fame because he was the only recognized expert on the tunnel system, where the great majority of people, of course, had no idea such a thing even existed? Where I think that 20 to 30 years later, now, we may be right back to that point, showing how fast people forget things, showing that the majority of people, yet again, need to be shown these tunnels and understand what is below their feet.
Now, by September, they had built a complete ramp. I'd like to see that happen today this fast. I'd like to see that happen today this fast. 40 feet of water, and there's another 2 floors below that. And there's another 2 floors below that. For me, it started back in high school and college, and one day the light bulb went off. Gee, my dad is the night supervisor at Marshall Fields. Maybe they have an opening. And they did. And they did. There's water in the Pittsfield building, and Marshall Fields, and the City Hall, and this place and that place. And we don't know where it's coming from. And I thought, I know. All those places had one thing in common. All older buildings, all older buildings, all older buildings, all older buildings that were connected to the freight tunnels still.
And a very interesting note here, down at the bottom of the article, where on September 1st, 2000, the Central Electric Railfans Association hosted a rare inspection tour of parts of the underground tunnel system. Unfortunately, we are told that this is not likely to be repeated anytime soon. On the wake of something that happened in 2001, there are now security concerns. The old tunnel system, a vital part of Chicago's infrastructure, a vital part of the old world, our true history, our true past, is now closed off from public access. Now, it is very possible that these tunnels were found, connecting the old world buildings together, connecting underground real estate, structures, as we were told. Finding these tunnels, and then our civilization constructed their form of transportation throughout this system, with the railways being laid after finding these tunnels. This is a possibility, but in my opinion, there is one thing that is for sure, is that these tunnel systems, these structures that we are unable to see now, have been there for a very long time, much longer than we have been told. And they are still here from the previous civilization, a civilization that was here only a few hundred years ago, in my opinion. Using electric locomotives in the underground tunnel. Very interesting. Naming this the Great Chigago Tunnel from 1908. Do you live here in this area today? Here's a public map, the one that they are showing us, from 1915, of the Chigago tunnel system that sits right below your feet today. Remember, there are thousands of miles of tunnel systems in this city alone. So this is obviously not everything, not even close, but it does show that there is much more below our feet right now. With another map titled Chigago Freight Tunnel System, Underground Transportation. Zooming in, we can see that the public was allowed to know that they are 40 feet below the surface of Chigago.
40 feet of water, and there's another 2 floors below that. 40 feet of water, and there's another 2 floors below that.
And pass under the river 11 times, holding 734 intersections, 26 private connections. Very interesting. Probably more than that. What do you think? Going on to the back of this thing, where it tells us that many warehouses and stores have direct private connections with the tunnels. These connections consist of approaches, switches, shafts, and elevators, which carry the tunnel cars to the levels above. And this is where things get very interesting, if they haven't been already. How tunnels are built in. In many of these cases, the tunnel connection was a part of the original plan of building construction. Do I need to read that again? I will anyway. Was a part of the original plan of building construction. This was done on purpose. And I have not seen one time in a narrative where they tell us about the construction of a building's tunnel system, where it should definitely say that, according to this document, where they state that that was a part of the building's construction. There has not been a single time that the narrative has explained how this was done, or even mentioned that a tunnel was connected to the building. Was this an attempt to hide that these buildings now hold this tunnel system, a tunnel system that is massive, right under our feet, that is no longer available to the public after 2001? Can you see that these tunnel systems may be used for something else now? You tell me. Again, I'll ask, now knowing what we know, where are we really? Do we fully understand that there are more than just hallway-type tunnels right under our cities?
I even found the name of the chef, but not a word about what they were served. Not a word about what they were served.
The ones that we are shown and told about, where I believe that we are past this point in our knowledge. I think we know that there is so much more below the ground. Structures, rooms, buildings, places that we are definitely not allowed to go or ever see. If they have hallways, they have more.
This building was probably about 12 stories and had almost as many floors below ground as above. Some buildings in the loop had their basements lowered so they could meet the tunnel. This is one of them. I believe this is one over at near Monroe and Wabash, where they've actually lowered the basement.
These underground tunnels, bases, these are not new ideas, and we know this. And we have seen a lot of lies, but this one is the biggest of them all. Telling us that no other city has tunnels. Are you kidding me? We know that they do. We have seen this. This is from a pamphlet issued probably, maybe. It might have been in the early 1940s, but they can't seem to remember anything from 80 years ago. By the Chigago Tunnel Company to advertise its services to local businesses and railways. So I'm going to ask you all a question. Do you really think that the tunnels are all done now? Do you think they haven't been expanded? Do you think that in the last 100 years they just stopped making tunnels? Or do you think that Chicago has an even bigger, more in-depth underground system than we could ever imagine? Do you think every city might have this? Let me know.
They are in Wabash over at the Palmer House. What's really odd is I found this photo long after I had taken this photo at the exact same location.
17 East Monroe Street, Chicago, Illinois. We have the Palmer House Hotel, where we are told that there have been multiple Palmer House hotels on this exact same site. When the first Palmer House was built as a wedding present in September of 1870, because we all know that building a massive hotel in downtown Chicago and giving it away as a wedding present in the 1800s was very normal. This was a common gesture back then. Do you think these photos where buildings are bigger underground, do you think that these are just myths now? Let me know in the comments below. I'm extremely interested to hear all of your comments. The Illinois Tunnel Company. What a name. We have tunnel systems documented on atlasobscura.com stating that these tunnels are connected to these buildings that I'm going to name right now. The City Hall, which we know, Merchandise Mart, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Chicago Tribune Building, the Civic Opera House, the Field Museum, and dozens of others, where they were pumping tunnel air into theaters and hotels as natural air conditioning. In 1959, the Chicago Tunnel Company went out of business, of course, and sold everything for $64,000. To who? Who bought this company and acquired all of their assets, or the old world's assets? According to the Chicago Tribune, the city assumed control of the tunnel system. So there we have it, where we find out that more buildings are connected, or they used to be, when in the early 1940s, the subway cut it off from the major department store clients along State and Dearborn, such as the Boston store. They have an underground tunnel. Carson Perry Scott got one too. The Fair, the Davis store, Mandel Brothers, and F.W. Woolworth and Company. All of these buildings got a tunnel back then, all connecting these buildings. And we of course remember the accidental flood from 1992, where it was of course an accident. Wait, what is this? A court case where it was revealed that the city was aware the tunnel was leaking before the flood. And the city basically allowed it to happen, where they knew it was leaking and did not properly maintain the tunnel, allowing for the breach and the destruction of the tunnel. Very interesting information. I wonder why they allowed it in 1992, where we are told that a man named George W. Jackson led the Illinois Tunnel Company. And when you begin to dig into this guy's narrative, it begins to reveal everything. When we find an article in the Chicago Examiner from January 1909, this entire operation, this company, is tied to something very strange here. Remember when we were told the public map in 1910? Well, right before 1910, an event took place in 1909, 1 year before. The cost of construction had bankrupted the Illinois Tunnel Company, which is the exact same year. All a coincidence, of course, that this event took place as well. 1909, same year. 67 didn't make it by fire in an unprecedented lake disaster. Flames follow explosions. All of this happening 2 miles from the shore, inside the tunnels, where 48 were recovered. And it is known that many others are beneath the surface of the lake. Again, I'm going to ask you all, are we sure that these fire narratives are what they are? Are they not nods telling us what they found? I'm simply asking questions because we have seen so many times that these questions end with answers. Exact identification will probably never be made of many of them, for most of them are headless, burned or dismantled, all connected to George W. Jackson Company. Were these bones found within the tunnels, possibly bones of the past, and explained away with this narrative, trapped in the tunnel 160 feet below the ground? a fire that was actually an explosion, according to Chicagoology.com, where the source of the fire is that an explosion happened 3 minutes before the flames. Destruction of the past? Destruction of what they found? Where the dates are exact. And now switching from the Illinois Tunnel Company to the Chicago Tunnel Company. Where another idea that I'm going to throw out there right now is that, is it possible that these tunnel systems were, of course, there from the past, from the previous civilization, but did these tunnels hold things inside them? Things that we have seen in episodes 72 and 78. Were these tunnel systems found underneath Chicago? Thousands of miles of tunnels. Where else have we seen this? Odessa? Paris? What are inside those tunnels today? Have these tunnels in Chicago been cleaned out of what was once there and then given a new purpose? What are we finding? The deeper we go, the more information we gather. Thinking logically, why would they go through the trouble to create thousands of miles of tunnels under the city when they had dirt roads, creating all of these tunnels and only to use them from 1904 to 1959, using them for only 55 years, and then blocking them off to the public?